now that I've done like so many different client pitch calls and like sales calls, discovery calls, whatever you name it, one of like the top three questions I get is like, what is your specialty? Like that's one of the first questions I get. So people are in fact looking for a specialty when they're looking for recruiting vendors.
You're listening to the Taylor Koo podcast. Join me as we do a deep dive into my passions and learning lessons in entrepreneurship, real estate, business, sports, art, and so much more. I hope you enjoy the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Taylor Koo Show podcast. We are joined back here with my great friend, Kyle Morioka. Welcome back, Kyle.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. Awesome. So we heard about his story on Tuesday. We are now getting granular, getting tactical into the action items episode for today. We are going to be diving into how Kyle started a recruitment agency. And if you're looking to start a recruitment agency, what are the tactical steps outside of just educating yourself about what you want to do? What are those tactical, actionable steps that you can take in order to start and get your first client for your recruiting agency? And also how much it really costs to start up. Because I know we spoke about that a little bit, but wanted to even discuss some of those options there. So I guess starting out, long-winded answer as to opening this up, what would that first step be when you were starting this recruitment agency? I mean, I can't imagine the first step just to go out to a company and be like, hey, want to let me recruit for some of your positions?
Yeah, could be. No. Yeah, I think the first thing is I like to like first focus on like what strategy that you're initially like focusing on. So obviously recruiting agencies, they've been around for decades at this point, right? There's like the big ones like Robert Half, like they have their finance and accounting division, and there's all these like boutique recruiting firms like mine that are focusing on like early stage tech companies. So I'd say like kind of formulating a plan, ideally that lines up with your experience as a recruiter. Just because that will kind of get your foot in the door and establish that credibility, versus let's say like, my background's been in automotive tech. If I jump to like, let's say I start talking to hospitals about healthcare recruiting, then obviously that's not going to land just as well as me talking to like a Tesla or something or another automotive company. So number one is like figuring out what your target business is, like who do you want to work with?
Okay.
Like what are the roles that you feel like confident in and like, fulfilling? And yeah, just like, figure out where you want to hone your energy.
Now, when you were getting that, how did you figure out the terms to then negotiate with some of these companies? Or is that the too many steps into the process? Is there something else we should focus on before you even get there?
No, I think that's a great starting point too. And I think that ties into like the strategy piece. There are a couple ways that like how I got that, I guess, information around, what other agencies were charging. I guess a few ways. Like one of them was I had experience working with other recruiting agencies in the past at like was mainly Shift and Lyft. So I had a general understanding of like what they were charging the companies to fill certain roles. And I understood like the contract terms, and some of them were like, contract buyouts for whatever candidates if it was like a staffing need or something. I think another avenue is just like reaching out to people in the industry. And, if you establish like a good relationship with another recruiter, right, they'll most likely like give you information that's useful as it relates to like, what are what's the standard contract terms that they typically sell to their clients. And I think number three too is like you can always act as a customer, be like, hey, Robert Half, like I need help recruiting for so and so role. Can you give me a quote? And then hop on a sales call with one of their agencies. You'll get an understanding of their sales motion and process, but then also get an understanding of how much they're charging per placement.
And so, So you did your market research then, and so it sounds like you did all three of them, or you hopped onto the calls, and then you had an idea of just, and then you created your offer then to these companies. And if you don't mind sharing, what is, and you don't have to share, but I am curious, like what those margins are per placement that you have, and then what you were able to negotiate. Because like I mean, starting out, was it smaller just so you can just get that testimonial and then build off from there, or did you just go for it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely smaller than what we're commanding now. Um, yeah, I had led off with you know, pretty much like the industry average for the fee, which I guess at the time was like, I guess the fee is simply structured on the hire's salary. So it's like 25% of the first year salary for like a single role. So we did take like a pretty big discount just given that we didn't have credibility in the market. We didn't have any case studies at the time, right? Um, Mainly our credibility was just like, I guess, my background and my partner's backgrounds in the companies that we had worked with in the past. Um, and then, yeah, in terms of profit, like, I guess back then, at least for the first year, we didn't have any recruiters like on deck to help fill the roles. It was just all the like myself and like my partners just like going crazy on LinkedIn or in our network and trying to find people and place them ourselves.
Mm.
And we didn't make any like income at the time, right? As owners. So I guess like theoretically the profit was like the value of the contract, but in reality, like at this point in time where OpenRec is at right now, like we obviously have a team of recruiters that are doing all this client delivery work.
Okay. And when you mentioned something about credibility then. Did you guys have a pitch deck, or like how did you end up booking the meeting with the companies? Because when I was working with an agency, I remember some of those calls that we had where they like had their requisitions, they had their job opening, and then you had like 36 other agencies that were just there on the call listening to the position, and then they were like trying to fill it, right? How did you like, was it an easy process to be able to get to that stage and get on the call, or was it like a number of calls of building that relationship out?
Uh, Probably more the latter.
Ooh, okay.
Um, Definitely took a lot of work. I think the low hanging fruit is obviously like the people in your network that you have the strongest relationships with.
Right.
Those people are obviously like ones that are, they're most likely to give you an intro to someone else just based on your working experience with them in the past, just
Okay.
because they can vouch for you. So I think it was partially from that where just like the act of referring us also kind of enhanced that credibility, initial credibility. To your earlier question, like we did have a pitch deck. It wasn't as pretty as it is right now. They
Okay.
just kind of explain like, our business services and like an attempt of how we're different from the other, millions of agencies.
Out there.
Yeah. And then yeah, and then some initial information on the team and the cost.
Hmm. And in the last episode, you mentioned that you put about like 30,000 of your own funds into the deal. So you bootstrapped the deal yourself. What
Yep.
were those funds used for? And would you have changed, wait, and would you have allocated those funds differently knowing what you know now?
Uh Maybe. The reason why I say maybe is because I guess I was in a different position back then because I was working full time right at Rivian and trying to build this business on the side.
Yeah.
Um, Plus, my partners were also on a pretty part time basis. So I guess the reason why I had chosen to invest that money, it was mainly hiring like part time contract recruiters to help fill the roles. It was more so just giving us leverage so that way when we did close a deal, then we didn't need to do a lot of the heavy lifting to actually fill the role. But if I was at that point starting it, didn't have a full-time job, then I definitely do the work myself and just save the extra expense. There's definitely a way to get to like profitability and get to a good, business model without, paying that much money up front. It's just a matter of like, I guess I was valuing my own time and then, trying to, I guess, get leverage alongside my full-time job.
Did you set up the LLC, and also did you have a website as well by the time you launched? Just to
Hmm.
like try and establish credibility. So those were also in
Yeah.
play as well. And so from start to finish, when did you get that first client to take the chance on you? How long did it take?
Uh, it was probably around like maybe the 4 to 6 month period
Whew,
after
that's
starting. Um, Reason being too is like OpenRec, my original idea for the company was actually not necessarily a pure staffing agency play. I originally wanted to build software to
okay.
compete with LinkedIn Recruiter, kind of building on like my background in like software product management and trying to build like a better, sourcing tool for recruiters to use. But then the reason why I built the agency model was because my background again was in recruiting, it wasn't in agency recruiting. So I wanted to build it to get to the point where I can get to cash flow positive and then use the profits to fund the software development.
Okay.
And also just like in the process learn about, okay, what does it mean to actually run like a staffing agency, firsthand. Um, but then like I think that's where the point, like 6 months in, we realized, or I realized that, yeah, I don't think I want to go down this route because there's a reason why LinkedIn Recruiter has a monopoly in the market. And
Yeah.
they're squashing a lot of the competitors too, and it's hard to compete just given the amount of data they have.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's when we kind of just committed, doubled down on the model, just like okay, running more of like a traditional agency business model, and yeah, started getting clients around like the 4 to 6 month mark.
4 to 6 month mark. And then when you did go to the table too, is there like a time period that they typically test you out for? Or is it just like, or is it like, oh, we have 10 positions and then that's, you get your shot. Here's 10 positions. Here's your shot. Go fill it. Like what do those deals look like?
Yeah, it's probably most likely the first couple scenarios that you mentioned. Like, there's definitely a trial period, especially if I mean, a lot of the times I just didn't know like the main point of contact the company is personally. Like maybe they're a referral, but then I still haven't like had a chance to work with them in the past, especially in like recruiting. So it'd usually be like either, if they did have 10 roles, it'd be like one or two roles that were the most urgent from their perspective, and then we have some like handshake deal, or maybe it's in the contract where if we fill these roles in, X amount of time, then we'll be able to take on, more roles with them.
Okay. Got it.
Um,
And okay, so let me get this straight. You you want to start a recruiting agency, make sure you get your website set up, get your LLC already taken care of, right? Then you tap into your own. Wait, and then geez, there's a lot of moving parts here. If you can, first hire would be try to have or before even then, reach out to the company to try and place or get positions to fill. Then if you can, you fill it yourself or you just hire a contract recruiter
mhm.
and just go from there. That's how you get your first deal.
Yep.
All right,
It's
easy.
it's pretty simple. I don't want to say it's like not hard. Like getting your first client is definitely going to be the hardest part of anyone who's looking to start their own recruiting business.
Okay.
But the way I think about it, just in like, I guess basic terms, is like you have your sales department or focus, and then you have your recruiting side of it. Once you sign a contract, obviously you need to fulfill the recruiting services. So once you have like your first client and have like the sales aspect solved, and you actually have, business to fill. Then comes the recruiting piece, which I think is like a little less arbitrary than the sales piece, just given how competitive it is to land a good contract.
So if somebody wanted to start a recruiting agency, what was one of the mistakes that you had then that you would tell them not to do? Or were you just perfect? You just
No, definitely not perfect. I'd say like, yeah, like kind of similar to what I was saying initially, is like finding your own focus or niche. Again, ideally based on, the expertise that you bring to the table. Like early on, we started pretty broad. We had dabbled in operations because like my background has been in operations. Realized that there wasn't as much of a hiring need as like more like technical or engineering roles. We shifted to engineering, but then still like that's still pretty broad in terms of like, the industries that we were focusing in. Like we're kind of just like reaching out all over the place as long as they're hiring, let's say, an engineer. But sometimes an engineer at company X might be different than the needs of company Y.
right.
So just getting as narrow as possible, so that way your messaging and your pitch to these people, if you get them on the phone or even like via cold email, like being so specific that it's like, okay, Taylor gets me, like he gets my industry, he gets exactly what I'm looking for in this person. So that way it's just less of a, reason for them to kind of doubt your ability. And then now that I've done like so many different client pitch calls and like sales calls, discovery calls, whatever you name it, one of like the top 3 questions I get is like, what is your specialty? Like that's one of the first questions I get. So people are in fact looking for a specialty when they're looking for recruiting vendors. And I know medium to larger size companies, they also have multiple recruiting vendors that they tap on based on their specialties. So they'll have like this agency A is amazing at sales recruiting, but then agency B is like good at software engineering recruiting. So they'll divvy up resources that way. So that way they can get like, the best of the best for whatever role.
All right. Well, there you have it. Go start your recruiting agency if you're listening to this, or watching this. Wow, dang. It makes it makes sense though. I mean, at the end of the day, like it's not rocket science, and it's just a matter of doing the work. And I do hope that one of my audience members actually starts a recruiting agency, because that'd been really cool. And then I'd credit you for helping them get that started. Have you ever considered trying to mentor people and starting recruiting agencies? I feel like people would pay pretty big money for that.
I've done it before. I've not really charging it as a service. It's more like pro bono. Like people reach out to me all the time, like usually like solopreneur agency owners, like starting their own agency. They haven't landed their first client yet, and then they're kind of looking for guidance on like how to do that. So I definitely help people like that, but I never really make into like a service.
Oh,
Partially
okay.
because they're also like,
Friends.
trying to build a job for themselves and not making money.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Oh, well, you have a good heart, and people got to take advantage of it right now before he does end up charging. Just kidding. But anyways, Kyle, thank you so much for your time onto this show. And if people want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
LinkedIn. You can reach me on LinkedIn, send me a connection request, and yeah, I'll probably accept it.
Probably. Probably.
Depends on how good your pitch is.
Depends on how good your pitch is and what your specialty is. Anyways, awesome. Kyle, thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for listening. I will see y'all next week.
Cool. Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks for listening to the Taylor Coup podcast. If you gain any value out of this episode, I'd really appreciate if you share this with your friends. Hopefully they can get the same value as well as you did. And also leave a comment or review on whatever podcasting platform that you're listening on. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you at the next episode.